GSTS, voice of the voiceless. It's SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, smoothest podcast host of podcast history. You feel me? I know what you think. You killed them in the last 56 episodes, and I did. SAF Mo, what's next? You gonna walk on water? I could. You wanna interview with Black Jesus Christ? You know, long dreads. You know, sipping on cognac. You know, smoking a packwood. Using sandals on with the ashy heels. Let it be smooth as fuck. I got something smoother for you. 57, 58. Don't be a lame. Watch it. That's it. I'm your prison lawyer. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey, how you doing? Great smile.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Got the whole room. It's not the lights that's brightening it up. It's your smile. Can you please state your name?
Yes, my name is Malika Avon.
Okay, beautiful name. Why did you come here today?
I'm here because I've got something to say.
Right platform. I'm going to give you the floor. Tell us what's going on.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and have this conversation. Like I said, my name is Malika. Malika means angel in Swahili. I like to give that context because I feel like I'm blessed with a lot of angels in my life, and I try to, in the work that I do, leave a little bit for the people who are around me. I'm the interim executive director at the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis. We're a nonprofit law firm. We've been representing youth and adults in Hennepin County Court for over 50 years. We were founded in 1970 by Black activists out of North Minneapolis, out of an organization called The Way that some people might know of, and then Native American activists in South Minneapolis out of the American Indian movement.
Dang, yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, they were coming together at the end of the civil rights movement. You know, there was lots of activity here in the Twin Cities. There were uprisings on Plymouth Avenue. AIM was doing work across the cities. And those activists were experiencing the repression of the state. You know, they had police at their doors coming after them, harassing them. And everyday community members too, low-income Black people, Native people, immigrants, were also experiencing the everyday sort of police harassment that we see in our communities as well. And so some of those activists said, we need a law firm for us, run by us. So they came together, they partnered with a few of the big downtown Minneapolis law firms, and they started the Legal Rights Center. And since then, since 1970, we've been working to provide holistic public defense. So because we're a nonprofit, we're able to keep our case sizes small, so our attorneys have the time to dedicate to providing really high quality defense to folks. And then we also have community advocates on our team who are community members. They know about resources, they know about programs, and they stick by our client's side to try to help them through their case. Not only all of the challenges of going through the court process, but hopefully through connecting people with resources, they're able to have a better outcome, to be able to show the judge that, you know, people have been making efforts to do really thorough investigations, collect witnesses and evidence that can help people in court. A big part of our work always has been a focus on young people, youth involved in the justice system. There's a big part of our core values as an organization of doing everything possible the first time a young person has an interaction with the system to make it their last time. And so we provide juvenile defense, but we also do work in schools. We do restorative justice work. We facilitate circles and conferences. And really, at the first moment when a young person is having a challenge in school, if possible, we want to be able to come in as a community organization, a neutral organization, bring together all of the adults in that young person's life to be all hands on deck. What do we need to do? Whether that's because of truancy or there's behavioral challenges, you're just not fitting in, you're not feeling connected, mom's got an issue with the teacher and there's trust issues there that's impacting that young person. We know that many of our parents have extreme trauma from the education system. We work in Minneapolis public schools and St. Paul public schools. Like, many of the parents of our kids went through those same schools and know what it's like to feel like they don't belong, that people have labeled them from the jump, and they're really, really triggered when that happens to their kids. So in our work, we come in, we try to facilitate these harm repair conversations when possible, in order to show the young person, to show the family, but also to show the school that like what happens in this child's life matters, and it's everybody's responsibility here. Everyone has a part of an accountability role to make sure they can be successful. So that's two parts of our work, the criminal defense part, the restorative justice part, and then the last part of our work is about changing the system. From the beginning of our organization, we recognize that, we could do really good criminal defense, and if the laws in the book are unjust, if the ways that systems like our policing systems or judicial system, even our education system, our housing systems, right? Like if all of those systems are continuing to operate in the ways that they are, we'll just keep having people come in our door and needing representation. So how can we get a little further upstream? How can we interrupt some of those systems operating in the way that they are through policy advocacy? So we work up here at the Capitol, doing work at the legislature. We do advocacy at the county level, at the city level as well. And really trying to push for a transformed legal system that hopefully is in line with more of what most of us, I think, like people with, like a logical view of what safety means, what justice means, what it means to actually be a neighbor, what we want. And I think many of us would say, like, what we have right now just isn't working. It's not getting us there. It's a dope organization. It's a great place. I could talk about it for a long time because it's I think it's like a resource that this community has had for a long time. 50 years is a long time for an organization to be around. And I think we've only been able to be successful because we're really rooted in community. We try to live out our values and we're adaptive. So, when George Floyd was murdered and there were thousands of people arrested because they're out there protesting, getting citations and tickets and stuff like that, we mobilized our attorneys to make sure we could be down at the jails, talk to people who were there, make sure they knew what their rights were. We helped represent protesters who were arrested in court processes. When community asks things of us, we try to respond. We try to explain when there are complicated things in the news. So understanding the different charging of those officers in that trial, or, over and over again when there are police killings, or even just like new laws on the books, we try to make sure that we can do our part to educate the community about what these changes mean. And through our Know Your Rights work, try to help people also know what their rights are when they're interacting with the police. I got to the Legal Rights Center about 4 years ago. I had been in Minnesota for a couple of years at that point. I was working on a master's in social work and public policy at the U, and I took a class in the law school in juvenile justice, and I met a staff member from the LRC at the time. Came to the office and just felt the vibes of the place. And I've held different roles in our organization, from being a restorative facilitator, working directly with youth in schools, to organizing some of our community members around policy changes, to the role that I hold now, which is our interim executive director. So I try to do what I can to try to keep our lights on, fundraising and some operations stuff, and helping our team access the resources that they need so they can do right by our clients.
Well, if you have anything going on as far as fundraising or flyers, anything that we can participate, always, you have my direct telephone number. You can always send me a flyer. I'll put it up on mine. And I feel like the important thing about us coming together, although we might not walk in the same lane, we're fighting the same fight. And I feel like we should be networking to help each other become successful. And whatever you need, we have you, because I believe in the work that you're doing. I'm curious. Do you want to go any further before
Okay.
I'm curious to ask you, what's the process? If I was an inmate in prison right now and I wrote you and said I had a case that I think that I'm innocent of, are you the people I talk to?
We don't do much post-conviction work. At times we will support other organizations if they're trying to do some of that innocence work. But a majority of our work is in the first kind of step of people's legal process. I will say, if you are in jail, or if you have a loved one in jail who's like currently facing pending charges, then that's where we come in. So we do our work in Hennepin County, so you need to have a case in Hennepin County. And what you can do is either write us a letter. You can go to our website, legalrightscenter.org, where our address is. You can write a letter, or you can come into our office Tuesday mornings from 10 to 12. We have open office hours.
One question too.
Yeah.
So could I call you from jail? Do you guys accept phone calls?
We do accept phone calls from jail, and those calls are like supposed to be a closed line call, as if you were talking to an attorney, and should be free as well as if you were talking to an attorney.
And so with that, you're helping in. So if I came to you, I have a current case in Hennepin County, I reached out to you, what services can I look at receiving from you? Is it a legal defense? Is it advocacy? Is it investigation? Is it all of the above? What can I receive from you?
All of the above. So we do have income guidelines that are the same as the public defender's office. So if you were able to qualify for a public defender because you make under whatever the number is, 125% of the federal poverty line,
yes,
then we can also represent you. That's true if you currently have a public defender and you have hired an attorney because you felt like you had to. And at some point in your representation, you're feeling like you're not getting the support that you need, the level of representation that you would expect, then yes, you can call us. The first step is talking to one of our community advocates. So they are the people who help explain a bit of what the court process is, what you can expect. They listen to your case. And then our team decides on a weekly basis how many cases we have the capacity to take. We try to prioritize, as I said, juvenile cases, but also cases where it feels like with additional time and capacity, like what we can provide in our office, we can be of most support to people. And then if we take your case, we're your attorney, which means we're, going through the facts of the case, your side, and ultimately what you want to have happen. Our attorneys, every attorney's ethic is that they are supposed to follow what the client wants. You want to resolve your case as quickly as possible. Our attorneys are going to fight to get you the best resolution in that way. If you say, I want to go to trial because I believe that I'm innocent and I want to stand up in front of a jury of my peers, then that's what our attorneys are going to support you with too. And between our community advocates and the investigators that we have in our office, and because of our longstanding relationship in Hennepin County, we do the work to find all of the evidence that we can to help you have the strongest case, to present the motions and the best legal theory and defense that we can, to hopefully get you the outcome that you need.
Now, is there any severity level that you don't take? So if I have a murder case, you'll take it. If I have a DUI, would you take it?
Yep, no severity is off the table for us. It does at times depend on our capacity, though, right? Because we want to be able to do good work. So if we have 6 attorneys on our team, if everybody has a super full caseload, at times we do have to say that we can't take a new case right now, or we can't take a super high case right now. But yeah, we've worked really hard to help people through murder cases all the way to your first time DUI or misdemeanor.
It's fantastic. I'm glad I met you. I don't understand why this hasn't branched off to every community, or you have not been statewide with what you're doing, because it's needed. When you look at the legal system and how overworked the public defenders are, and how the prosecutors really have the run of the roost when it comes to this, because the public defender is so overwhelmed. Everything turns into a plea bargain. I'm reading a book right now in regards to the prosecutor ability, or his power, this unlimited power he has to charge and pretty much do whatever he wants to do, and it hasn't been reined in at all.
Totally unchecked.
Are you so with Mary Moriarty becoming the head prosecutor in Hennepin County, what did that make you feel like, and were you rooting for Martha?
So I'll say for my personal view as Malika, not the Legal Rights Center, I was really excited for Mary to be elected to the office of Hennepin County Attorney. And I think it speaks to what the community wants, or a majority of the community wants, which is someone who understands the complexity of both sides, having been the former chief public defender and now stepping into a prosecutorial role. Mm-hmm. Mary can understand like the depth of the challenges that our community members face, and has seen the ways that the prosecutor's office and the police departments are able to, without rain, as you mentioned, really run over community members. I feel really excited and optimistic about what she's going to be able to do, and she's got a big fight ahead of her.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just yesterday, right, or Thursday night, the Attorney General Keith Ellison stepped in on one of the cases that Mary's office has been working on, the prosecution of 2 children and an adult for the murder of Zaria McKeever, which is a heartbreaking story. But whenever we see movements towards progressive change and people trying to change the system, there's pushback. And we're seeing that literally right now on this particular
in the
case.
industry I work in, which is engineering. Any innovation that shakes the core of the culture, the traditional culture, which they call it, and it's just that flying on autopilot. This is how we do things. It's always you're gonna always get backlash. You're gonna have pushback. You're gonna have people who are resented, and it just takes that shaking because they're so used. They've become fat off the residual effects of this system not working.
And I think even to your point too, I can imagine in engineering when you're having innovations, it's because you understand that the current system is not working well.
Right.
Or at least there could be a better way.
Or the failure rate of whatever you're utilizing could be improved.
Yes.
Right. So you want to innovate it to maybe cut out some unnecessary movements, increase some safety. Yeah. So you're saying the same thing in your industry. 100%. That now it was cool when we were locking up all these people of color and throwing away the key, but now we want to try to come up with some type of rational solution to the problem that has not been fixed.
Yeah.
And of course, individuals who've cut their teeth on this behavior is upset now because you're questioning their judgment. So with Mary coming in and you seen it as being an opportunity, did you know her prior? Did you know her as a defense?
Yeah, I knew her, or we knew her. We worked with her as an organization when she was in that role of chief public defender. And she was fighting hard for clients that we ended up taking on at times too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What else is going on? Because we talked a lot about the school to prison pipeline and you being instrumental in trying to derail that and actually interject yourself in it before he becomes that or looks like that. So I've talked. I don't know if you know Chantel Allen.
Yeah,
you know Chantel. Yeah, she was one of our first interviews. She so graciously came when we were. And then we didn't have none of this. So she came in and she chopped it up with us. I just seen her recently with Paul Snell, and she talks a lot about that. That's where her passion is. Yeah. That's where she finds herself in that area. So what are you doing? Because we talked about the liaison officers being in the schools and them not wanting them there, and then they're appearing again. What is going on with that? Bring me up to speed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Chantel yesterday, and I am so grateful for her leadership here in St. Paul Public Schools and in the community here. As someone who deeply understands the lives of our young people and what they need, and who has the courage to fight up for exactly what they need and push systems to change that. And, one of the things that she is really pushing right now, and I think many of us in community want to stand strongly behind is the idea of restorative justice in schools.
Yes.
So, folks might know that a couple of months ago, a young person was stabbed at Harding High School,
yes.
right? A super, super sad case. This young person was coming out of a youth correctional facility, was trying to make a different choice in his life, switched into Harding. It was his first day at that school, and ended up crossing paths with people where there had been previous conflict, and his life was ended that day in the school building. And the trauma of that for his family, but also that entire school community, the St. Paul community, right? That's big. And when people experience trauma, when community experiences trauma, we often go into like fight or flight or freeze.
Yeah.
And the quick response, that fight or flight or freeze, what that looked like for many people was, we got to get cops right back into the building here, right? And what Chantel and other members of community and what we've been trying to say too is that that's not the solution, and that I personally, I don't know. None of us can know what could have happened if there was an officer in the building when Devin was killed, but I don't believe that that's it. When I think about the specific circumstances of this young person, I think about the need for deep harm repair when we know young people have beef. And when young people in buildings have beef, people know it. Like teachers know it, the other students know it, the people in the community
parents
know it,
parents
know it. And often there are many times that people have raised their hand and said, hey, we need a little bit of help here, right? Mom's calling saying, look, I know that there's a problem here. Or other kids are like, look, I can see what's going on. And very often our schools rely on traditional, very punitive methods that are about separating and punishing. So like these two kids maybe run into a little bit of conflict. They have their first fight. Cool. You're suspended for a couple of days, then come back to school as if everything's normal. Or we'll suspend you again and we'll change one person's schedule and we'll come back as everything's normal, without any of the work that's required to actually repair the harm with the young people. So it keeps escalating and escalating. And as we know in our communities too, it's not ever just like this one kid and this one kid. It's like, oh, all of my cousins are involved, or this happened because my big cousin had an issue with your big cousin from 10 years ago and we don't like each other, or you just live on the wrong corner and that's like an issue for us, right? That's deep-seated stuff, and the solution that we know to work from experience is actually like putting people in spaces with like the work that requires to get them safely into those rooms, but putting people in spaces where they can have the conversation and hash out their needs, figure out what respect and safety looks like, and then can move forward from it. And that has to be true when young people experience conflict with one another, when there's like intergenerational conflict in families, and when families or young people have those same issues with their schools. And that requires a totally different mindset than what we currently have. I think our systems right now are based on a belief, a stereotype that especially Black children, especially Black boys, are violent, that they, aren't rational or can't control their emotions. I work with so many young boys, this is just an aside, but like so many young boys, the first thing that I ask them, like what's going on with you, or like what's the challenge here? It's like, oh, I have anger management, right? Like I can't manage my anger. I don't believe that to be true. I think someone has told that young person that. Right. So we have these negative stereotypes of Black children, Black boys, Black girls too. And because of that, we've created a punitive system that says, fine, you are not a child anymore. You are this angry thing that we don't know what to do with. So let's get you out of the building. Let's suspend you. Let's expel you. Let's pass you off to somebody else to deal with, rather than seeing them as children who have all of the capacity to learn, who have all of the like emotional intelligence to love, and who have all of the potential to be the next leaders in our community.
Definitely.
But we don't see them that way, and so we've built a different system. I think if we all, which includes I think many like older Black people, like especially older Black people, looking at our young people as full of potential, as full of emotional intelligence, as full of love, and saying, no, what I'm seeing from you right now is a challenge that I know we can work through together. And even if you try to push me away, I'm going to stick with you through this challenge. And even if you make another mistake, I'm going to stick with you through this challenge. I can hold you accountable. I can tell you that this won't be tolerated. I will demand respect from you. But I'm not going to hurt you in the process of getting there, and I'm not going to leave you. And I think that's what, I don't know, when I imagine a transformed youth justice system, the work we're trying to do at the Capitol and policy change too is all rooted in this belief that our children deserve better and that we owe them a lot better.
I might have to drop the mic over there, girl. I don't know, Oh man, I might have to sit down. This is your show. Hey, so I'm gonna say this to you because I think we were in the same space in the same circles. Dr. Raj. Dr. Raj. So that's where we met, right?
A hero.
Yeah, I had him on the show that following week, and I wanted to say that he was one of the most. It's not even his. I actually, because I do all the editing, I watched his video, it's raw video, and this guy is so much about restorative justice and understanding the intricacies of it. Yeah. It's not a joke, it's not a game, it's serious. And he understands what the gap is between some people understanding and some people not understanding it, and how that could become so with that being said, when Chantel was on the show, she said to me, and it really was profound and provocative. She talked about the tracks, and I know because you're college educated, collegiate. It was a spoken word piece that was called Tracks. So when she talked about tracks, women of color wear tracks in their hair, but they're also tracks in school, and she did that. She ran that. She did. So when Chantel brought it up, because she's also educated, we were able to vibe at that moment and talk about tracks. But the thing that struck me was the pipeline is set up by you prefabbing this stereotype of this individual, making them accept that because they're malleable at the time. So if you tell me anything, I'm going to believe you because you're an adult. Yeah. Even if I know it's not true, I'm still going to fall into it. Yeah. And then I start acting out those behaviors because it's the only way for you to... I don't know if you ever read The Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. So it's our way of becoming visible in their society by acting out those stereotypical behaviors, because they can't see us as an educated black male. They can only see us as an athlete. They can only see us as mentally slow, angry, socially deprived, or economically deprived. So The Invisible Man was one of my favorite books I've ever read since I sat down, and it's just So the reason I say that is because when Chantel described the tracks to me, and then I think about individuals coming up saying this prefab, I'm angry. Yeah. It seems it's the society's way of utilizing that invisible man deal. Yeah. The only way we can see you is that if you become this individual, that now we have a place to put you, and then track you straight to prison.
100%. And if you talk to children, and I'm intentional in my language too. I don't think of kids as juveniles. I don't like to think of them as offenders. I talk about children. I talk about tiny humans. I talk about babies. And that's not to minimize the massive harm that they can create, but it's to check us and to remind me that who we're talking about is children. So when you have conversations with young people who are escalated, who are acting out, they can verbalize that too. They might not use the exact words that a traditional middle class educational framework would say, but they will tell you I cursed her out because they don't pay attention to me otherwise. Right? Or there's just so much going on at home that I can't afford to deal with any of this, right? They say these things, but our stereotypes are so deep that we hear that as excuses, or we hear that as like intentional, like bad behavior.
Yeah.
So often we're like, oh yeah, well he knew exactly what he was doing, and so that's why he's getting punished. It's like, no, this baby is telling me what he needs. He needs attention. He needs additional support. He needs someone to help him. He's confused, right? Like so much going on in his life. And we just got to do better.
Even with I know I'm way older than you are, but just like now they're making a point without, individuals coming in hungry. So I'm dealing with trying to figure out how to eat a meal.
Yeah.
And what's my next? 'Cause when I went to school, lunch and breakfast at school was my main primary. I had to get those in my diet because I wasn't going to get that at the house.
Right.
So just to have to have the conversation for you to say right to somebody else, that'd be what are you talking about?
Yeah.
How could that even be possible?
Yeah.
And I think so when I talk about policing, a lot of time I talk about policing and being like, I'm definitely against policing. I think it should be community based, but I'm also going to tell you that policing looks different in the different communities.
100%.
Looks different when I walk out the door, different than someone walking out the door in another community.
Absolutely.
And I can attest to that. So as we talk about children and the ability to turn them into predators and make them seem like they're these are the worst. We don't know what to do with them. So I'm talking to individuals on both sides, right? So when I sit down in this space, I ask, okay, so I'm listening to you and I see your perspective and I believe exactly what you're saying. But I got an individual right now who still believes that a 15, 16-year-old should be doing life. I mean, where is the intersectionality of that? And how do we start the conversation with them when they're dead set on believing that there's no redemption from it for an individual if they commit a crime at 14, 15 years old? So I just think that there's such a huge gap. It's going to take a lot of cultural awareness and people coming together and understanding a lot of different things. I definitely applaud your work and what you guys are doing. So the track is, I can call you from county jail.
Yes.
I can, if I qualify for public defender, more than likely I would qualify for you based on capacity.
Yeah.
You
can call from the county jail. Your sister or your partner could call as well. And if you're not locked up, right, you just know you have charges or you've gotten a notice that you have a court appearance coming up soon, you could come into the office too.
Okay, what do the resources look like? You said advocacy. Is there any advocacy toward, is it mostly treatment, mental health, that type of advocacy, or is it housing, jobs, advocacy?
All of the above. I mean, our work is really to try to connect people with the resources that they need. An example of a recent client that we worked with who was in jail, got either a call or a letter from jail, right? We were able to find resources through the Minnesota Freedom Fund to get their bail paid so that they could get out of jail. And then worked with them on a case plan to help them find a job and also get into treatment for substance use. All while our attorney was working on litigating their case, right? So filing those motions and all that sort of stuff. So that by the time, all the pretrial hearings, whatever, by the time they actually got in front of the judge, the client was in a stable job and was in treatment. And we were able to make the argument to the judge that, this person is putting in the work. The charge was substance abuse related, but they're putting in the effort. Can you give them another chance, or can you give them a better chance? And the judge actually did a downward departure on what the sentencing guidelines would say. The person should have had prison time for the charge that they got. And they ended up getting community probation in order to keep doing the things that were keeping them safe and keeping the rest of the community safe, right? So as long as they continue to be employed, as long as they continue to have their treatment going. And I'll say the other thing that we really try to think about in our advocacy too is how are we helping people. I'm doing this, I'm just thinking about a hug, but how are we wrapping our arms around this person, and how are we, with their consent, involving their family members or their trusted people, whoever, because it's so hard to go through any of this alone.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard to be a human person in this world alone, but certainly if you're if you've done something wrong, if you've made a mistake, if you've made a bad choice that you knew was a bad choice. We really try to think about like who can be the supportive community around you, who can be there again when you make a mistake again, but also when you're like, I'm just alone and I don't want to do this, who can help you continue to fight. That's the type of holistic support that we try to provide.
That's phenomenal. I mean, I wish I was in Anoka County with my charge, but I wish I'd known about what you got done, because I advocated your services to a lot of individuals, knowing that you guys are definitely on the right path when it comes to innovation, when it comes to, and it's not even innovation, it's just doing the right thing when it comes to a person, because we talked about support and how the individuals that when I do get charged with a crime, the prosecutor is trying to make me take a plea. Yeah. The public defender is not doing their jobs for whatever reason. They're not, and it just seems like you're in this. I always described it as myself as being just like inches below the water, but I cannot get out. I mean, it's the water is. I mean, I'm drowning, but I'm so close to. I mean, all I need is a push to get. Right. So that's how I felt a lot of times. What I like to do is sit down with you, have a meaningful conversation, and just talk a little bit about what got you into what you're doing, your journey to what you're doing, and what you see the future looking like. Okay. Great. All right, we'll be right back. That smile, man. Come on now. We'll be right back, and all right, stop recording. 57. 58. I told you, this is the host of the show. This is the host of the show, not me. Okay. But I'm SF Mo. I'm SF Mo, your prison lawyer, the smoothest podcast host in podcast history. Don't believe me? Get off the couch, go ask your mom. With the phenomenal, and like I said, if I ever need a co-host, if I'm ever sick, I'm not going to be sick, because I'm sure she's going to take my job. Can you reintroduce yourself, please?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Malaika Avon.
Tell them what that word means.
Malaika means angel.
Beautiful.
In Swahili.
I'm
the interim executive director at the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis.
What's up, man? I mean, I just been sitting back in awe. I was gonna pop some popcorn and sit back and just have her tell me a story, because it's just not to say that it's not the entertainment part of it. It's just the education part of it. That what you're bringing to the table and what you're attempting to do is like I'm like looking around in this space that I'm in, and you're doing those things, right? And you're so young. Come on, man. You're like, I mean, come on. I feel really good about just talking to you, and we met by just listening to you talking like, hey, I really want to get you on a show. Could you just, I know we talked a little bit about just your stepping into this role, but it starts off in New Orleans.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't have any twang or anything like that about you. Like, no, you sound just like you're from, not to say anything about it. I would have never assumed that you were from New Orleans.
Yeah. So anytime I talk about myself, I have to go back and say that I just come from a strong family. So both of my grandmothers were strong Black women. Both were educators. One taught high school math, the other taught high school PE. My mom's family is all from New Orleans. That's where I was born and raised. My dad's family is from North Carolina. Outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where Michael Jordan is from.
Oh, get out of here. Don't try to connect yourself now. Don't try to connect yourself now. No, I'm going to give you honorary, because she's such a good co-host with me. I'm going to give her honorary Jordanship. You know what I'm saying?
I heard that there was some Chicago fans in her. Yeah, so, my grandmothers, both of them, were a part of like some major integration efforts. And more than anything, what they did was put their children in integration spaces. So both of my parents helped integrate schools in New Orleans and in North Carolina.
What do you mean? Like, were they marching? Were they part of policy?
Like, they were like, my parents were like the first Black children at the elementary schools that they went to. And I think about, I can't imagine what that was like as a parent.
Yeah, especially down south.
Yeah, to believe in justice so strongly that you would put your child in a situation like that. And I think that a lot of people talk about like the Ruby Bridges and the children who actually did that, and that's a lot, to take nothing away. Like, my parents went through a lot as the first Black children in their schools, but their parents, my grandmothers, that strength that they had to have,
right,
the confidence that they had to have in their own identities and what they could provide for their children. If you're having a rough day at school, you can come home and you'll be safe here. That's the strength that lives in my blood and in my bones, which I'm so thankful for. Growing up in New Orleans was the best. It was a great place to grow up. And I was.
Why did you say that? Is it just the culture? It's the historical, the history that brings you to the land, knowing who you are. A
lot of it, New Orleans is one of the most unique cities, I would say, in this country. There's a rich culture of lots of mixing and melding. New Orleans was one of the largest slave ports in the country during the era of enslavement. And so there's a strong African and Caribbean root there. There's also a strong history of fervent advocacy of Black people and Black leadership within the community. And people just generally proud to be of where they're of, have a lot of pride in their sports team and their music. And so, I was, and also a community that's experienced a lot of trauma too.
We talked a little bit about that Angola, the fact that it's called Angola, the fact that it still represents what it represents when it was a slave plantation.
Absolutely. So the Angola Penitentiary, one of the state prisons that continues to exist in Louisiana, was a plantation. And for most of the institution's history, people who were incarcerated there did manual labor on the plantation. And actually, one of the things, shout out to people in Louisiana, specifically some groups, if folks want to look into Families and Friends of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children.
You said shout out.
Yes, they are fighting hard right now because their youth justice system in Louisiana is at a crisis, and they are actually housing children at Angola right now. So, Angola is where there are death row inmates in Louisiana, people who, men who have been incarcerated for some of the highest offenses, and now they're putting children there.
But it's still rudimentarily a plantation
at its core, and
it hasn't done no innovations to change its culture. So I'm sure they're being housed separately.
And they have to be housed separately. But if you can, it's in the root of the place, right? And so what it means to be a child, to be sent to Angola. We were talking about stereotypes earlier and the messages that children internalize earlier.
Yes.
Can you imagine what that is to be 15, 16, 17 years old and know that, that's your future? You go to Angola, that's it for you, And a lot of the children who are there, who are 15, 16, 17-year-olds, a lot of the young men who are there, are also living the direct impacts of Hurricane Katrina. So I was in middle school when Hurricane Katrina happened. My family was really blessed that we didn't lose our home, though we did have significant damage. When I was in 7th grade, and it was this weird experience of getting to hang out with my cousins. We went and we all lived together. We lived in a house of 20 people for 3 months with all of my cousins and my grandma and grandpa all there together. And that was fun, right?
It used to be like that though. That's how we used to come up. That's why they called that's why they called my great grandma Big Mom.
My grandmother's Big Mom too.
Yeah, that's where it comes from, is the fact that we lived all in the same houses, our cousins, our uncles, our aunties. And that's how we, because all that money came into the house, we were able to afford different things and built up wealth.
And when people needed a place to stay,
it was always available.
Yes,
you
yes.
never, and that's and I remember coming up as a child seeing that, and we just went away from it for whatever reason. But that's funny you brought that up, because that's how I used to feel that same way. That's why my cousins and I have such a great, they're like my brothers and sisters. And it's not like that anymore.
No.
Right.
And so, it was like this, incredibly traumatic thing that was happening to all of us. And yet, I think the adults in our life did a good job of trying to keep us safe and let us know that we were safe, and we just had fun together. But not every child had that same experience. And when we came back to New Orleans after Katrina, and the level of devastation that you saw every day, and
Can you cut it out? How did you have fun together? Can you cut it? I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
How did you have fun? What's fun? I'm listening. And you can delete this.
We had so,
What is the fun when you're in a traumatic, horrible? You just said we're in the fun together, like you and your family.
Yeah,
what did that look like? Fun.
We, the adults, and especially the women in my family, do everything for their children. And so the aunt who we lived with, we were living a couple hours north in a city called Lafayette. And there were, I think at some point, 10 children in the house, and my aunt made sure that everybody had a special meal every week. That we had a rotating schedule. And I remember she used to make me these, I don't know, she's a good cook, but it was something that I really liked, and it was hot dogs and potatoes. That sounds gross.
Well, you asked for it.
But I asked for it.
You asked for it.
And she made it for us.
We're asking what the fun was. Your life of it's semi-travesty.
It's just definitely a tragedy.
You find it in the hot dog, in the meal that you're, whatever.
That's exactly what I want for every child. I know we're going to get to why I'm passionate about this work and what I want for children in our communities. But in the moments that were the most hard, when they were struggling, the adults were experiencing all of this trauma, they said, you know what, I'm going to find ways for you to be seen. Even if you were having, I'm in 7th grade, I had a bad attitude some days, right? They said, look, I see you. You need a moment. Let's come together. We would I don't know. There's just all these little memories, special things.
But that's what family's for.
Yes.
And that's has always been I think why it was essential for them to break down the family, because once you lose that, for me to know who I am as an individual and have that reinforcement from a positive reinforcement with somebody I care about, in turn forces me to be successful.
Yes.
Because now I have someone who I don't want to disappoint them.
Yes.
And that's constantly going through in my head. So when you start taking those guideposts away, now I'm looking from outside the family. Now the positive reinforcement that I think is positive is actually negative reinforcement, and it's just individuals who are utilizing me for and they don't have my best interest in mind.
Humans inevitably are going to work to get their needs met. That's just what we are wired to do. We're wired to survive. We're wired to get our needs met. And so young people especially, as they're going through adolescent development, puberty and all the hormones going through their bodies, their brains aren't able to understand risk in the way that we can as adults. They can't understand also, though, who's actually looking out for them.
Right.
But if they're craving connection, if they're craving safety, if they're craving independence, all of these things that they are going to crave, that we all crave as humans, but especially you crave in adolescence, they're going to find it somewhere.
Right.
And if it's not in the family, then they look out into the community. And also historically, our communities have been able to provide positive and safe spaces for all of that.
Well, it's definitely been available to us because from Africa, the community was anybody at a certain age was my brother. That's what we get like brother from and cousin from, because it's historically through us. For if a person was the age of my father, I addressed him as my father, and he treated me as my father. He treated me as his son, I treat him as my father. Same way with brothers and sisters. So we always have had it through our community. It's just for some reason we've become disconnected from it, or feel as though it's not necessary anymore, when it's ultimately superiorly necessary right now.
Absolutely. You know, I think about a couple of stories in my own family. I think about my father. I think about my own brothers. I think about my cousins. You know, home isn't always the place where people need to be, right? Sometimes, and especially as we see it in adolescence, young people, what they're trying to do is assert their own independence and figure out who they are separate from their family. And when that like alpha male starts clashing, or when, you know, the young girl and mom starts clashing, or whatever, those rules that people have in place on them, I think historically our communities have also been able to provide other safe places for kids. So there were times when my dad didn't feel like listening to his father's rules. He was too grown. He went and stayed at the pastor's house for a couple of months. And that was accepted and welcomed and understood, that then when the pastor's kid was having a hard time, they would come stay with my grandmother, right? And there was that mutual understanding that all of these children are all of our children.
It's common unity.
There's no shame in saying, you know, he can't be here right now. He's got to go somewhere else. Like, that doesn't mean that you're a bad parent, that there's any like judgment on you. Come on in, baby. Like, this is home for you now. It
goes back to the state saying it takes a community,
absolutely,
a tribe, or it takes a village to raise a child. And that, like, a lot of times these different statements we say, like my mother used to say a lot of stuff to me, and I used to always just tongue in cheek it, like, you don't believe fat meat's greasy. You don't believe shit stink. All this other stuff. I used to hear it. I never knew what it meant. Misery loves company. You know what I'm saying? Until I actually experienced myself. So even when I say it takes a village to raise a child, it's things that we just tongue in cheek all the time. But they've been placed in our community for a reason, because it's necessary, and we fundamentally lived by those rules. So New Orleans.
So
was great. Was super pie. I need to go down there. We're gonna go down there for Mardi Gras.
Yes, you should go for Mardi Gras. You should go. I was a kid during Hurricane Katrina and experienced that, and there were beautiful times with family, and there was really hard times. And the connection I wanted to make, though, was that, you know, we're seeing the ripple effects of that now, and the young people who experienced the trauma of Hurricane Katrina, who are now young adults, who themselves might have kids, right? Who are now destabilized and haven't had the resources they need. The infrastructure of the city isn't there. Now there's a major crime problem in the city, and people are scratching their heads. Why are these kids doing this? What can we do to help them? The solution is all of the things that we're talking about in terms of family and community support and proactive resources. And the root cause of it is that community trauma.
Are they scratching their heads?
I think that people are.
How ridiculous is that? What?
I mean, I think people do it here too, you know? Like,
they're like, how did this happen? Like, you're obviously have put together like an amazing biography, and like like, how are people still scratching their heads?
Yeah, you know,
that's what I question. Like, are they confused? Or are they joking?
I think it's a bit of both. You know, in the Twin Cities right now, right? Like, we've had a bit of a spike in crime as well since 2020, and people are scratching their heads. What's going on? Why is carjackings, for example, right? What's going on? Why are there carjackings up? If any of us were to take a logical approach, and I think many of us actually do, we would recognize that in 2020, we experienced a pandemic. Young people were literally quarantined in their homes for months without many of the social supports and safe spaces that they normally had. Their schools, their after-school programming, sports teams. They were just at home. And if you could, I don't know what y'all's experience was like during the pandemic, but it was just me and my husband. And there were days when, like, we couldn't look at each other. We needed a break. So can you imagine being in a little 15-year-old body all of those emotions, you already don't want to listen to what your parents say, and you're trapped in the house, right? So that's one. Then George Floyd gets murdered, and children are watched as a black man had the life drained from his body and saw the unrest in the city, right? I mean, that to me is a recipe for young people to act out, young people to search for opportunities to feel strong, to feel confident, to have a community around them. And where do they go? Where do they find it? In the streets, with people who might not have, might not have their best interests at heart, or just with a bunch of other children who don't have like any logical thought. They can't understand risk. They're just doing dumb stuff because that's what you do when you're 16.
You're stir crazy. You want to do something. You want excitement, stimulation. I mean, whatever it might be, it's not something that is like even the spike is not something that I think that that draws you to the point where, I mean, I understand property value and property things, but this is a capitalist country. They're going to always side on some property being diminished instead of a human life. You would have more concern with a store being burnt up than a person going to get executed.
Right.
So
That being said,
it's like the capitalist behavior and the fact that these cars are being jacked, and the fact that it's an insurge in it. It's just sensationalism for individuals pointing fingers at individuals.
Absolutely.
That's what I see.
I do too. And I never, all of my work is about advocacy for young people. And I feel like I have to say this, and it's frustrating to keep having to say it, but I never want to minimize the harm that people experience.
Never. That's what Raj brought to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they did something wrong.
Absolutely. But there's this head scratching of like, why are they doing this? And what can we do to solve the problem? Well, all we can do is like lock them up, or we're going to like invest millions of dollars in these sting operations and leave cars running so that we can catch kids in the act.
Right.
It's like, no, we know why they're doing this, because they need support. So what if those millions of dollars were put into making sure that every single young person in this community had those supportive resources, the mentors, the jobs, right? Like, why are kids jacking cars and then dumping them? To get money or for fun. So let's provide them with some money or provide them with some fun. And the other thing that like just drives me in this community especially is that we are talking about a very small number of young
That's what I was
people.
going to get at. That's what I was going to get at that too, because John Choi made that same approach. He had the same approach. We know who's doing it. We know they have family members, blah, blah, blah. But even when it comes to crime in general, just having Paul Snell on the show and saying that 95% of the people get out and don't come back is a challenge to the actual concept that we have a crime problem. The fact of the matter is there's certain individuals who are going to continue to do the crime. And those usually are the individuals getting out and coming back in, getting out, coming back in. So when it goes to your carjacking, the individuals who are doing this is a small amount. And if they do come into the neighborhood, I'm standing on the corner. I don't have nothing to do. They pull up, they're in a car, I jump in the car with them. All of a sudden I become part of this charging, because they're going to charge everybody in the car.
Right.
So yeah, again, I've read several books on criminology, and it talks about that 5% of individuals being responsible for like 30% or 40% of crime. And it rings true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think then, like, if we want to invest in public safety, if we want to invest in actually solving the problem, then we look at those people or those particular spaces and think about how to invest in them. I mean, for young people, for example, and the people know, we know who these children are.
Yeah, definitely. We
The
know the
schools
family.
know who they are.
Yeah,
the families,
definitely.
the churches know who they are. And I'm not to say that it's easy, right? That you can just like roll up on a kid who's been like misbehaving and be like, hey, do you want to like come and hang out with me and do after school programming? No, the kids are going to say no. It's going to be hard. But we also then I know them, we know them. We have the mentors in community who actually the young people will listen to. And I can tell you that those people are not MPD officers. Those people
That's-
are often not their probation officers. And there's this like head scratching of like, well, they won't listen to anybody. No, they will.
Yeah.
It's just we haven't invested in the people that they will listen to.
And that's a conversation I've been having. I mean, it's been funny because I'm at the table, I'm having this conversation outside the table. I'm be on a phone call tomorrow talking about the same thing. And so I dealt with a lot of lifers coming out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we haven't even made it out of New Orleans yet. We're still in we're still at, so, I deal with a lot of lifers and they put 30 years into the joint.
Mm-hmm.
30 years into a prison sentence is usually enough time for a CO to come in and maybe even make warden, because that's a life sentence. That's a career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they spent 30 years in the prison system. They get out 50, 60 years old. Now they've been told they need to go do manual labor when they have a lot of skills, skills where people will listen to them. They were mentors in their community. A lot of these individuals who are causing all this foolishness in the community have uncles and cousins that were locked up with these individuals that they know. So they have a sphere of influence is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
So why aren't we not employing these individuals to make these walks with either the youth or people getting out or just coming back and re-enfranchising these people back into the community with jobs? Because they can't find any jobs except for these manual labor jobs you want them to go to where, I mean, come on, man. You got a guy 60 years old driving a forklift who's got a bummed hip.
Yeah. And that to me, that proposal that you're describing is exactly the like idea of restorative justice for me.
Mm-hmm.
That like full circle, you created harm at some point. We don't minimize that. It is on you to help repair that harm. Yeah. And the community will support you in doing that. And I want that option for these older men. I want that option for young people as well. Yeah, that's the actual that circulatory, because I mean, as much as they have this story they tell, and I tell it a lot too. I've heard about it in prison. It's a story about these elephants running into the village. It's a true story where these young bull elephants were coming to the community, stampeding in the village, doing it for fun. That's what they were having fun doing. It never happened prior, but it happened when they had these young bulls doing it. So they brought an elder into the community and they explained to him what was happening, and what he went out and did. He got a fully mature male bull, and it stopped them from doing that. Yeah. So that's the circle right there, right? So that's what we're talking about. It's not if you're employing these individuals that who want to come back to the community and help the community and make it better. Yeah. Why not help the youth find it by me explaining my story to you? Maybe that might wise you up, and maybe one or two people might not want to do that and do something else different. That's fine. Yeah, let those people do that. But for the people who want to, I mean,
that's fine.
I do in my vision of like what our world can be, and I don't think we're that far from it. Everyone has the opportunities that they want to get what they want done.
Sorry.
I think you can. So, all right, let's get out of New Orleans.
Well, let's go. So now we're in. So.
I was like, she's like, that's fine. Sorry, Maria.
So
keep going.
We're in North Carolina.
Yes,
I went
to college, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
That's Chapel Hill, okay.
Chapel Hill, big Tar Heel.
What up? That's Jordan, Michael Jordan. Yeah.
Multi-time NCAA champs.
Oh, were you athletic? Did you do any athletics?
Not at Carolina. I was a runner in high school.
You look like a runner. Yeah. Yeah. What was your events?
So I ran distance. So I did cross country, and then I would on the track I would do the mile, or 2 mile, and the 4x4. Yeah.
4x100 relay.
4x4 relay or the 4x8 relay.
Okay. Yeah. All right. He was getting it in.
Distance runner. But when I was in college, I studied education. Like I mentioned before, my grandmothers were educators, and I thought, like, this is what I want to do. I had as a young person, as a teenager, I did babysitting and worked at summer camps, and I just loved working with children. I thought I wanted to be a high school teacher. And I did my education degree. I, student taught in a couple of public schools in Durham, North Carolina.
In Durham.
And I love Durham. It's such a beautiful city. And I had a hard time in the public schools.
That's important.
It was spirit killing to be in those.
Are you in a public school in North Carolina? I missed that part.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in. So is it?
I was
doing 2 years. She did her 2 years.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to. So the education system is different than New Orleans. It's different than Minnesota.
I don't think it is, honestly. It felt very similar. The schools I worked in were similar to the schools that I went to in New Orleans, and similar to schools I see around here, is like the vibe that you feel at times is that it's a warehouse for Black children.
Yeah, definitely.
And that the policies and the majority of the administration and even educators at times do not love these children. And I felt that. I felt that the ways that I was being asked to teach were directly in conflict with my values. I was
to explain that. Give me an example.
Yeah,
Of
absolutely.
Black children.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That could be the title of the book. I'm just saying, I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I was a biology teacher because I'm a science person.
Oh, okay.
And in my class, I had some of the most beautiful children, but I had children who were pregnant. I had children who had been involved in the justice system and were like actively on probation with ankle monitors on in the classroom.
Oh.
I had children who were in the foster care system. And by the time they're in high school, right, they're just couch surfing. They're living wherever they can live. And what I wanted to do was create space for these young people to be safe so that they could then learn biology, right?
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You got that. It's that Maslow hierarchy of needs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier. If at 8 a.m. your first period class, you're hungry or you're tired because you didn't sleep last night because you were out trying to just stay alive, you're not going to care about cellular mitosis and how cells divide, right? So what I wanted to do was create space for my young people to have their needs met and to be safe. And what I had to do, what the school told me to do, was I had to keep moving through this curriculum and give them these standardized tests. And when there were discipline problems, that I had to call the school resource officer into my room or move them through this behavior chart. When I was a young teacher, you talked about this earlier. I look young. I look the same age. I look the same age as my students. I did need help. I was a student teacher, and rather than providing me like help from veteran teachers, what I was told is if they act out, you have to call the cop in here.
Mm-hmm.
And then specifically, there was my senior year of college. I was teaching at this school, and there was just a massive brawl in the cafeteria in one of the lunch periods that day. There were something like 40 kids involved in a fight. 20 of them got arrested that day. I mean, like squad cars came to the school that day to arrest children. And in the aftermath of that, not only did the school
to arrest children,
not only did the school lock down, the kids weren't allowed in the hall, right? Like all of those like really rigid things that happen, but the school actively participated in the prosecution of those children.
Yes.
So is that then why you look at the warehousing?
100%.
Because it's not a pillar of education.
Mm-mm.
It's more so, I want to say it's almost like a processing.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
There was the opportunity there to really figure out what was going on and provide those young people with what they needed, right? You have 40 young people involved in a fight. We could have, as a school, said, you know what? We are going to do everything we can to make sure that you are successful. We're going to figure out what's going on. What's the beef here? Mm-hmm. We're going to make sure that you have the right supports around you. Again, we knew who these kids were. Many of us knew who had the beef and in fact, knew that it was going to pop off that day. People knew that. Okay. But instead, what happened was the school turned over video, had, sent over their records and their suspensions and all that stuff as a part of the prosecution. And I just couldn't do it. I knew that I was a great teacher. I knew I could have created a safe environment for my kids, But I just...
Is that your responsibility?
It wasn't my responsibility, and did I want to be a part of the system in that way? And so, and it just left me with this question of why have we built these systems the way that we did? So rather than going into...
as a woman, like I'm just saying, people put a lot on you. Like you probably had a lot,
Yeah, I was young too,
is that my job? Is like, what am I doing?
I mean, I did, but I still felt the call to be in community and to still work with these same young people.
Well, you got the mission.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So
we already know that.
So with the 40 kids that were brought in, all to give criminal records to, it's deplorable because now you're just, for that little bit now, you might messed up someone's life forever.
Absolutely.
Instead of trying to, like you said, you're in a point where you can do at least restorative justice, keep these people out of the criminal justice system and actually figure out what the problem is and put them on the right track.
Absolutely.
So was that the point where
I was like, okay, I know that systems, like being in the system is not the space for me. And I had these questions around why don't we do these things that seem very logical and very rooted in what I knew from the community that I grew up in. And so instead of going into teaching, I did youth work. I ran after school programming and summer programming, and I did it with middle schoolers too. Which was so powerful to see what it looked like if a community wrapped their arms around these babies really young and said, you're 10, 11, 12 years old. The school's already starting to label you. You're already starting to have some challenge. But hold up. Here are some other people in your life who are providing a safe space for you every day after school till your mom gets off of work. They're providing you food. They're providing you academic help so that you don't feel dumb when you're sitting in class and then you want to be a clown.
That's important that you might mention that. That's super important.
And then also educating parents to know so that they can support their child themselves in the school spaces. And after doing that work for a few years,
how do you educate the parents?
We did a lot of parent advocacy. The first thing I think for many families is knowing what their rights are, right? So knowing what your child is owed if they have an IEP, an individualized education plan, knowing what due process rights you have if your kid is getting suspended, that you have the right to challenge that, knowing what your child should be learning. So when they come home and they're like, I don't have any homework, or, like all the little things that kids say.
Scared. I'm sorry.
And and parents, we were talking about this earlier, parents have experienced their own trauma. They themselves were called dumb. They themselves had those stereotypes put on them. They didn't feel safe in school. And so when they get a call from the school, it's one of two things that I've seen a lot in the work that we do. Either the parent is like, instantly believing the side of the school and is just like in on the kid, like kids in trouble, you have to do whatever the school says. Or mom's ready to pop off and she comes down to the school and because she knows, she's like, you're not going to do to my child what you did to me.
Yes.
I just because it's a thing that when you said making the child feel dumb, I think as a black male in the public schools, that's sort of how we sort of come up. When Chantel was here, I told a story
you said
about.
What do you mean felt? That's how you felt.
That's how we came up in that system, feeling like we were dumb. That's how I felt. Like it didn't matter because like if you look at an IQ test, a lot of things that they asked we don't see. Like I didn't see a dishwasher. We went to the place to wash our clothes. We didn't have a washing machine in our place. It's just like a lot of stuff that would just common knowledge some people wouldn't have. So that the IQ test itself was slated against us. But now I would just say I had a situation where I grew up in Chicago. Chicago has a suburb that's called Harvey. It was predominantly black. So my grammar school was predominantly black. But at a certain time in my life, we moved from Harvey to South Village, which was experiencing migration of the white folks. So it was white at the time we moved in, but as we moved in, they moved out. So so I'm in school this is the first time I've ever been around white children because I moved from Miami, from Miami, where it was mostly Cubans and things like that to Chicago, Harvey, which is now predominantly black. Now I'm in a school that's going through transition. So now I'm in 5th grade at the time. And I don't know, you're way younger than I am, but they had the English books where they ask you, it was like superlatives. So you would go through and it'd be like, today, my day was bad, badder, worse, whatever. So when they asked the question, I was like, I raised my hand. I knew the answer. And it was like, my day was the baddest. Because in my mind, that's how we talk, right? So we hadn't made that conversion to accepting our vernacular as something that, so to me, and then she corrected me. This is what she said. This was all this. So to go back to what you're saying about children, them being impressionable, malleable at this time. The lady said, so the kids in the class started laughing when I raised my hand and said it. I'm feeling shitty. Yeah. But it comes out. She says to the kids, hey, don't laugh. It's how his people talk. That's my experience with the public school as being a black male. So do you understand how that made me feel? So you can understand I'm not raising my hand anymore. You can understand that now I'm not really, I don't feel like I'm smart. I don't feel like I don't understand what's going on because that's how me and you talk all the time. Right. As a matter of fact, before we went in there, we just was chopping it. But it also made me take command because eventually in my career, I do come across someone who actually believed in me through high school, English teacher, and she worked with me and I became better and better. And I actually went to an all black college and then having a professor was an African-American male. Game changer. That was phenomenal. It made me the person I am now, but it was just these blocks. Yeah. So that when you said it resonated so much with me. I didn't want to take any away from the story, but even right now, I can still remember that day.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. The fact that you can remember that. So how old were you when that happened?
I was in 5th grade.
I mean, you can remember the exact words of that teacher.
I can remember everything she said. She said, stop laughing. That's how his people talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I bet she doesn't remember that at all.
It was just the normalcy, but it affected me so profoundly. Yes. But that goes back to a black males feeling dumb. They don't understand, like you looking for a way how we feel dumb in the school. And it's not even something, I don't even know if she meant it purposefully. She was just talking.
Right. Yeah. And that's not to say that she shouldn't have accountability for that moment. But I don't believe that many of the educators and policymakers who've developed these systems have active malintent constantly.
I agree with you. I'm not going to argue.
I believe in the goodness of people. That is like a part of who I am. But I know that people make mistakes every single day. Constantly. I make mistakes every single day, constantly. And what we need as a community is the ability to call out one another when we make mistakes and support each other through it. And recognize the harm and impact of those mistakes. Right. So, like, I'm sure I can imagine what you were like as a kid. And, those were the kids that I was working with, and they were so cute and funny, and their parents were so strong and powerful. And I was doing that work in North Carolina, and I was loving it. But still running into these systems, running into child protection, running into the juvenile justice system with our babies in middle school, running into all of the policing system and the way that, like, people's parents were being impacted by it. And I was just continuing to have both this confusion of why have we built it in this way? Why do we continue to invest in it in this way? And this passion for doing something more. I loved working with kids one-on-one, and I wanted to get more upstream and do policy work. And at the same time, I was dating this guy who's from Minnesota.
Yeah. The truth comes out. We should have started with that. Go ahead. Tell us who is this guy?
Here we go.
I sound like your dad. Who is this guy?
My wonderful.
Hey girl, have you seen the picture behind you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a prison photo.
Anyway.
That's a prison photo.
This is beautiful. So my wonderful husband Kenneth and I had been dating for 2 years. We met in college, and I was ready for a next step, and we were thinking about where we wanted to live. He's from here originally, grew up in the north suburbs, and so we decided that we were going to move to Minneapolis. And I started this program at the U, this social work and public policy program, and I was learning a lot and getting some of these questions answered for me around how did we make these policies and how can we change them? A core part of what I believe, and I think this was taught to me from my grandparents and from my parents, is that, every rule we have on the books was written by a human at some point.
Exactly.
Every law, every policy is just words on a paper that some group of people who had some power were able to put into practice. And so if that is true, then we could change every rule and every policy on the books. And I feel so grateful for the examples of advocacy from my family who taught me, if you don't think something is right, then you have both an obligation, but also an opportunity to change that.
And that's funny that you brought that up, because as you were talking, I was thinking about a friend of mine's who, it didn't come through a family member, but he received a grade on his report card that he felt like it wasn't a grade that was acceptable for him. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why are you mad? He's like, I'm never going to accept something that, I'm never going to say, what I'm saying? So but again, being around that individual, actually, and that's those architects that you have in your life that show you this positive role models. And he's a phenomenal gentleman.
I was here to study, and then I just continue to, think back on these children. I can see their faces. I remember their names. And as I got more involved in the community around here too, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was, I got plugged into organizations like the Legal Rights Center, like the NAACP, and got the opportunity to then start making some noise around juvenile justice here in this community. And
so it was through the U and that MAPL program that you decided to that your best work could be done in the area that you're in currently.
Absolutely. And, I'm not from here. I continue to feel like a new person here. And I'm deeply inspired by the history of the activism and the present day activism.
And their activism is low key, because it took me a while to realize that AIM was established here in Minnesota, which was wild. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they do have a nice Native American First Nation population, but for something like that to be such a inspiration and disruptor in this society and starts here, shows you the depth of their advocacy, their activism in the civil rights movement and this movements in general. So I mean, and for you to utilize that and say that was the foundation for where you're come from, now it all makes sense.
And it's I believe that there's space for all of us in this work. I'm a woman. I'm relatively light skinned. I have not experienced incarceration. But I'm thinking every day the work that I do about my brothers and my uncles and my cousins and my father. I'm thinking about the young people that I work with, and I'm thinking about how can I leverage what I have in order to fight so that other children and the children who are currently incarcerated right now have a better future.
Can I ask more about that?
Have you ever been challenged on the fact that I know I challenged you a little bit over the phone. Not this light skin, but the non-incarceration part is for your fight. And I was just questioning you. I was just checking you down to see where you come in at far as your conviction, and I can see it, as we talk more. But other people coming up to you saying, "Hey, what are you doing in this space? How do you get here?" I
mean, I appreciate that every time, and I think in the if and when people come to me with that, I try to center on the fact that I'm here to leverage my voice in the spaces where it's appropriate for me to leverage my voice. And because of the way of my educational history, the way that I talk, the way that I move, I can be heard in certain spaces that other people can't be heard.
Right.
And I don't believe that that's a good thing, but I do believe right now I can stand up and help. I talk about this constantly in my work with families, right? Very often when I'm going into school spaces and doing restorative processes or just like showing up as a family advocate, mom has probably been saying this for 6 months, right? Y'all aren't doing right by my kid. My kid needs these 3 specific things. It is horrible. It is a bad feeling to walk with her into the school and me say the same things and people get it taken seriously. I think my job then is to point that out as it's happening and to make sure that we're pushing systems to act differently as well. So my goal is to not take up spaces that I don't need to be in, but to leverage what I have, the education that I have, the resources that I have, the connections that I have, in order to get the right people in the spaces so that they can hear what needs to be heard.
That's great. That's eloquently placed and put in the cachet behind your political wealth, being able to not hold it to your chest, but actually weigh it and leverage it to a point where you empower other people is the reason why I wanted to do something like I'm doing, because individuals like yourself, I mean, you're never going to be on the Breakfast Club, talking about
that's not my space.
But you can come here and people can at least hear about what you're doing, hear about the great works that your organization provides, and actually understand that there's an advocate for us. So when they walk in your door, they feel like they know who you are, and the genuineness that you have with this work that you're doing. And like I said, we talked like briefly a couple of different times, but every time I talk with you, I feel like you're the person to know. I mean, I feel like you're definitely the future, but you also have a grasp on reality that most people are missing, right? Like you understand that there's a better way to do this, and it doesn't take a lot. It just takes somebody caring, right? Did you have a question through the youth? Actually getting to them early.
I believe so.
Serial killers.
And that could actually change. I mean, and is that just through education, or is it through resources outside of it, or is it just a cornucopia of a bunch of things?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think, and maybe this is where I have like this distrust of systems. If we really wanted to solve this problem, we would invest in education, in family supports, in housing, and all of those things that make young people well, so that when they inevitably make bad choices, which they're going to do, we rush in with the supports, then we wouldn't have the problem that we have and wouldn't then feel the need to have prisons to incarcerate people.
But the thing about it is this is a country of exceptionalism. So with that being said, we know that that some people are built to fail and some people have been built for success. Now you're telling me that you want to utilize my tax surplus to help these individuals. And I'm saying, well, what for? Because at the end of the day, they're exposed to fail. So to me, it's like this utopia that nobody really wants, because as I sit down with the individual who's part of corrections, the more I talk about abolition of prisons, the more he sees that his pension and his job is going to be gone, and there's no evolution to him, because he's always going to be a CO in his mind. He's not thinking like, okay, well, maybe the fact that prisons closed, maybe I can become something other than a guard. So when you say that, when you talk to me, I believe I'm with you. I'm championing your conversation. But I was like, well, how far does it go in the real world when you're talking to the average Joe?
Well, I think there's actually this really interesting idea of a just transition, which comes out of a lot of like climate change and environmental justice work. And so similar conversations, this is my family has this conversation. You work on an oil refinery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now the government's trying to curb how much petroleum and, greenhouse gases and all that sort of stuff. People, my family in Louisiana knows climate change is real.
Yeah.
Hurricanes are getting stronger. Like Louisiana's going to be wiped off the map, right?
Yeah.
And their interest today, though, is how they're going to feed their family. So they want that oil job, and they need that oil job.
Definitely real-time shit. Yeah.
A just transition says, we're not just going to close down all the refineries, or it would be unethical for us to just close down these refineries without training people and providing all of the people who are currently employed by this toxic system opportunities to be a part of our new green future.
Yeah.
And so as I think about correctional officers and probation officers and police officers, I think that we need to have a just transition for them too into new spaces. A lot of times when people talk about youth incarceration or youth facilities and adult prisons too, right? They talk about how there might have been a CO in there who helped them out. Right?
Yeah, definitely. I could tell that story.
There was a person there who changed their life. And my question is, did that person have to be in the prison to do that work?
No.
Could you have had that same connection in community? And my answer to that is yes, because many of them do, right? They leave those facilities and they come back and they still do the same mentorship and they're still just as impactful. And so for the people, the correctional officers, the people who are currently in a toxic, dying system, but who's got into it because they wanted to help and continue to try to help, I want to figure out how we can make sure they can help. And for the people who are there because it's the only job that exists in their community, right? We're in rural Minnesota and all you have is a prison, so that's the job you have to take.
Yeah.
That's not fair. We shouldn't be investing in your community so you can have a different job.
Right. Well, I just feel like, it was a stimulus program in those rural communities to give them jobs.
Yes.
The same way they took jobs out of our community, they put them in their community because the farming, whatever was going on at that particular time, they knew they didn't want to have them not have jobs. Prisons made sense across the boards. With that all being said, I thank you for the conversation you provided for me. You elevated me. You elevated my thought. Where are you going to be at again? Where are you going to be out again? Where are you going to be? Another event you're going to be at? Is anything coming up?
Yeah, we've got a few things coming up. I don't know when this podcast is going to go live, but this Friday.
This Friday coming up?
This Friday. So
next Friday. So, because this is Saturday. So, you're right, this Friday. I'll probably have it up this Friday.
Okay.
She knows what she's doing.
This Friday, Dr. Raj and a few others have organized this Understanding and Responding to Mass Incarceration Conference, which is at Metro State. So I'll be speaking there. And then you can just follow us. If you follow us at the Legal Rights Center on any of the platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you can see where we're going to be. We're pushing through the end of the legislative session right now. And so there's definitely opportunities to get involved in that work. And like we talked about before, if you need representation, hit us up. The one thing I didn't mention that I do want to make sure that folks know about, you asked me about, what if you're currently in prison? We don't do post-conviction stuff, but the last piece of the puzzle that we do is expungement and helping people clear.
No, that's great for me because I'm interested in it, and I have the individual I work with, he's going through it because he had a medical. I've talked to Jonathan McCullen. He's pushing for jobs in regards to medical, felons to be able to get back into that field. But the guy I work with, he had a job for about 2 years working at a nursing home as a janitor, and they finally did his criminal background, and they're basically saying that they're going to restrict his job because they don't want him around patients and stuff like that. He has to be supervised 24/7. So because we had just had John Choi on the phone, on a show, he called up John Choi, and John Choi said he was going to be active in making sure he expunged his record. So expungements is becoming and I don't know why legislation hasn't been put in place where at least some mechanism to allow you for it to automatically happen?
Yeah, well, there is a bill right now that's having some success this year at the legislature. It's called the Clean Slate Act, and it does create an automatic expungement process. It's current
on all crimes.
No, it's currently for certain offenses.
Exactly.
And very low level offenses.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, who's that? I mean, really, those individuals usually can get expungements regardless.
Right.
So,
and so I will say we continue to push and would like to see automatic expungement across the board. Until that happens, our office does do expungements
on all crimes.
On all crimes, and so what we will do is a free consultation with anyone, even if you just want to see what's on your record. You might not know what's actually there. You've been pulled over a few times. You don't know what's there, right? We'll do a consultation with you to let you know what's on your record and what opportunities you have related to getting an expungement. There's also a few other options. For example, if you're not eligible yet for an expungement, because there are certain time limits based on the severity of the offense.
Is there anything general you can give me, or it has to be specific to the crime? Can you just be like, well, it's usually 5 years after you're off parole?
It depends on the crime and the severity, but typically and all of this is also potentially going to change soon, but for a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, I think it's a 5-year waiting period, or misdemeanor 5, gross misdemeanor 7, and then depending on some felonies, it's either 10, 15, or you might be permanently unable to get expunged. It depends. So it's really good to just have a conversation with an attorney to know what your options are.
One more thing before I hold that thought, whatever you're thinking. So I'm saying too, so you say all the time limits are predetermined, but what if I'm doing things in the community prior to that? Can that expedite that time period?
No, those limits are like statutorily, they're on the books by the law, so you do have to follow them. But a couple of things, if you are thinking ahead, you're not eligible yet, but you're thinking ahead that you want to get an expungement. Again, talking to an attorney could be good, and our attorneys in our office are really great at helping you think through what information should I be collecting right now so that when I'm eligible, I have a strong history to show that I'm, supporting my community. I also have a strong history of showing how my record has been impacting me and why I need it resolved. Mm-hmm. And there are some ways that you could apply for what's called a Department of Human Services set-aside, which is an exemption to work in human service fields. So maybe like your colleague. Yeah, so we can support with applications for that and for an expungement. So, sorry, I know we were wrapping, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't say it at the beginning.
No, the expungement is always good to hear from.
What does side look like, Maurice?
So a Department of Human Services set-aside says it is an exemption that you can get from the Department of Human Services. If they've run your background and say, no, you're not able to work in human services, you can go through essentially an appeal process, and they would set you aside to say, okay, you actually can do this work. And it's a really good remedy for people who, might still have to wait another 2, 3, 4 years until they're eligible for an expungement, but they want to do work. They want to do good work. Yeah.
Maurice.
Yeah.
You're saying it. You're saying it.
So there are options, and the system is so convoluted and complicated. Again, I know people just get burnt out because they just try. They're applying. They're trying to do better by themselves or for their families or in community, and they keep running into these roadblocks. And so we want to be able to help people with that. So again, follow the Legal Rights Center. Look at our website. Hit us up. Even if you don't know if you would qualify for our services, just give us a call.
If you don't know, then you know. And
we can try to connect you with other resources who might actually be able to help you, or maybe you just learn a little bit too.
Well, I just think just this right here is more it's way more information than I thought you were going to bring to the table. It's educating me on things that I didn't know, and I thought I knew a lot. Basically, when it came down to what you guys did, and it's good to know, like I said, any information out there that's positive, that can help an individual get out their circumstances. It's a lot of people sitting in Hennepin County right now, So it's great. They're only specific to Hennepin County.
I know.
We're specific to Hennepin, but if you call us, we can make recommendations for other places who might be able to help.
You can even if they're in Anoka or like whatever.
Yeah, we can't. We only can take cases that are in Hennepin, but we will try to direct you to resources in the community.
What would be like in Ramsey County?
So similar to us in Hennepin, and we do our work in Hennepin, in Ramsey and Washington and Anoka counties. There's an organization called the Neighborhood Justice Center that is a similar nonprofit law firm. They do similar work and they take cases in a similar way that we do. So we often make referrals over there. And then we also know a number of either pro bono, so free attorneys, or low-cost attorneys who are sometimes able to take cases. We partner with the National Lawyers Guild. We could all use more resources. There's a big need. There's a big need out there, but we try to make connections for people. If you call us, we will answer. We'll try to find you some support somewhere.
So you said your interim. This is the last. You said your interim. What do you need to be? Are you pushing for exec?
I'm hoping. You got
my vote. You got my vote.
I'm voting.
Yeah, you definitely. So tell them to call me up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you seem to be the quintessential individual for the position. You have a good vision, a mission that you're following. You're passionate about what you're doing. So I feel like everything that I don't think there's any reason for you to be interim. You should actually be. What do you have to vote, or what's the deal with that?
Our board is working through a process. Our former executive director actually just took a job in Mary Moriarty's office.
Who was that?
Her name's Sarah Davis. And so she's now working for Mary's office. And so when she left, the board asked me to step in as an interim for the time being. And so I did, and I'm happy to serve in this way. And I'm optimistic for the future of our organization. Our board has to make the decision about what they want to do, and I know that they'll make the right decision, whatever it is. And I'm committed to this place, and so even if my title changes, I'm here, and we're here for community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed. It takes a lot to get me impressed, and it's all good. I appreciate you. I thought you had flaked on me.
It's just late.
I called you. We talked. We're talking about something totally different. No, we're talking about 2 months ago.
Can I do like high fives?
We called them about 2 months ago.
Over here.
We're talking about 2 months ago. That we had
not high five, man. I got this is a geode.
It's beautiful.
Desk. I mean, who knows?
And you forget to give me my damn ticket. We need to talk about that off camera.
I apologize. I apologize for taking a while to get back to you. I don't apologize for going through.
Living her life.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I want you back. Especially become executive director.
Okay.
I want you to tell her we're gonna put together your. Matter of fact, I'm gonna be your campaign manager. You about to get this damn job. SAF Mo signing off for the day. I'm going to smoke, y'all. I'm out of here. Peace.
Ron, what do you got to say about SAF Mo fans like them efforts?
I don't give a fuck what anybody says. It's America, and you should be able to do and say what the fuck you want. God bless